The warning beacons had floated in space for 10,000 years. They spoke in every known language, repeating the same message over and over. Do not approach. Death awaits. Turn back now. Every species in the galaxy knew about 7. Parents told their children stories about it. Scientists wrote papers about it. Politicians used it as an example of ancient wisdom. The planet sat alone in its corner of space, surrounded by automated weapons that would destroy any ship foolish enough to come close. The Galactic Council had placed the quarantine there long before humans learned to make fire. They called it necessary. They called it protection. They called it the only way to keep the galaxy safe from the horrors that lived on that world. Commander had read every report about 7. She knew the stories, a paradise world that became a nightmare, an ancient biological weapon that turned the entire planet into a death trap, parasites that could rewrite your DNA in minutes, spore clouds that ate through metal, predators that hunted anything that moved. The air itself was poison. The water was acid. Even the soil was hungry. In 10,000 years, the Council had sent hundreds of expeditions to study the planet. Not one person had ever returned. Was thinking about all of this when the distress signal arrived. She was sitting in her captain's chair aboard the Defiance, a mid-sized exploration vessel that had seen better days. The ship was old but reliable, much like her crew. They had been mapping a quiet sector of space, looking for mineral deposits, when the emergency transmission cut through all channels. The message was broken and filled with static. A Council science vessel called the Bright Discovery had suffered a catastrophic engine failure. The explosion had thrown them off course, straight through the quarantine barrier. They had crashed on 7. 47 researchers from 12 different species were stranded on the deadliest planet in recorded history. The Council's response came quickly. Ambassador Prism Voice, a being made of living crystal who spoke for the elder races, delivered the official statement. The survivors were to be considered acceptable losses. No rescue would be attempted. The quarantine would remain in place. This was unfortunate but necessary. Listened to the announcement with a cold feeling in her stomach. She looked around at her crew. Lieutenant, her combat medic, had stopped cleaning his equipment. Doctor, the ship's, had put down her research notes. Sergeant, the biggest and quietest man she had ever met, was staring at the communication screen with an expression she had never seen before. They are just going to let them die, said. Her voice was soft but angry. The quarantine has stood for 10,000 years, replied. They are not going to break it for 47 people. 47 people, repeated. He rarely spoke, so when he did, everyone listened. 47 people with families, with friends, with lives they want to keep living. Stood up. She walked to the main viewing window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 47 people were waiting for help that would never come. They were probably scared. They were probably hurt. They were probably watching the sky, hopping to see rescue ships that the galaxy had already decided not to send. She thought about what it meant to be human. Her species had only been traveling among the stars for a few hundred years. They were newcomers to the galactic community. The Council species had millions of years of history. They had built empires and fought wars and discovered secrets of the universe that humans could barely understand. But humans had something else, something that the ancient species seemed to have lost somewhere along the way. Turned back to her crew, set a course for 7. The bridge went silent, opened his mouth, then closed it, gripped the edge of her console, simply nodded as if he had been waiting for exactly those words. Commander, the ship's communication officer said carefully, the Council has forbidden any rescue attempts. If we approach the quarantine zone, they will consider it a violation of galactic law. I heard them, replied, set the course anyway. The news spread quickly. Within hours, Ambassador Prism Voice was on their communication screen, their crystalline body flashing with colors that indicated extreme displeasure. Commander, the ambassador said, You must turn back. This is not a request. This is a warning from the Galactic Council itself. No species has ever survived 7. Your humans are brave, but bravery is not enough. You will die, and your deaths will accomplish nothing. Looked at the alien ambassador. She had dealt with council species before. They were old. They were powerful. They were also, she had noticed, very good at accepting things they did not like. Ambassador, she said, how many rescue attempts has the council made in the last 1,000 years? Prism Voice paused. None. The planet is too dangerous. Any attempt would be suicide. So for 1,000 years, whenever someone crashed on that world, the council just let them die. We had no choice. The quarantine exists for a reason. Leaned forward. My species comes from a world where the air is trying to oxidize us every second of every day. Our own planet has earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and hurricanes. We share our world with animals that can kill us with a single bite. Our own cells sometimes go crazy and try to murder us from the inside. We call that Monday. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You have spent 10,000 years being afraid of one planet. Maybe it is time to try something different. The ambassador's colors shifted to something did not recognize. You will fail, you will die, and the council will not mourn you. That is fine, replied. We are not doing this for the council. She cut the transmission. The Defiance jumped to faster-than-light speed, aimed straight at the most dangerous world in the known galaxy. Behind them, the ambassador's warnings faded into static. Ahead, the warning beacons waited, repeating their ancient message of death and despair. Gathered her crew in the briefing room, and sat around the table, their faces serious but not afraid. They had all volunteered for this mission. They all knew the risks. We have 3 days before we reach the quarantine zone, told them. 3 days to prepare for a planet that has killed everyone who ever landed on it. I will not lie to you. Our chances are not good, but those people down there have no chance at all unless we try. Cracked his knuckles, then we try. Nodded. I did not join the Exploration Corps to watch people die from a safe distance. Pulled up her research files. I have been studying the old reports. The planet's biology is adaptive and aggressive, but it was designed to kill council species. Humans might be different enough to survive. Might repeated. Might is better than nothing, replied. The commander looked at her team. They were not heroes from old stories. They were just people who had decided that doing nothing was not acceptable. That was enough. Get some rest, she ordered. In 3 days we find out what we are made of. The Defiance flew on through the darkness, carrying 4 humans toward a world that had defeated the galaxy for 10,000 years. The planet looked beautiful from space. Swirling clouds of green and gold covered its surface. Great oceans sparkled in the light of the local sun. Mountains rose above thick forests that stretched from horizon to horizon. If had not known better, she would have called it paradise. But she did know better. Those beautiful clouds were filled with spores that could dissolve organic matter in seconds. Those sparkling oceans were more acidic than battery fluid. Those thick forests were hunting grounds for predators that the old reports described as nightmares made flesh. The Defiance slipped through the quarantine barrier without trouble. The automated defense stations had been designed to stop ships from leaving, not entering. Apparently, the ancient builders had assumed that no one would be stupid enough to fly toward the planet on purpose. They were wrong. Entering atmosphere in 30 seconds, announced from his station. He had spent the last 3 days memorizing every medical report from previous expeditions. Most of that reading had involved detailed descriptions of how people had died. Sealing all compartments, activating air filtration. Everyone get your suits on. Pulled on her gear. It was standard equipment for hostile environments, nothing special by human standards. The council species used much more advanced protection when exploring dangerous worlds. Their suits had energy shields and nanofilters and automated medical systems. Humans just used thick plastic and rubber. Sometimes simple was better. The ship shook as they hit the upper atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across every console. The hull temperature began rising immediately. Acid bacteria detected on the outer hull, reported. Her voice was calm but could see her hands trembling slightly. They are eating through the coating faster than expected. We need to land quickly. Was already strapping himself into his seat, checking his weapons one more time. He carried a pulse rifle, a shotgun, 2 pistols, and enough knives to open a small store. When asked why he needed so many weapons, he had simply said, "Better to have and not need." The descent was rough. The ship bucked and rolled as strange winds pushed against it. Something hit the side with a wet slapping sound. Checked her sensors and reported that a flock of flying creatures had tried to attack them. Their bodies had exploded on contact with the ship's speed, but their blood was already adding to the corrosion. "I see the crash site," called out. 2 kilometers north of a river. The council ship is mostly intact. I am reading life signs, but fewer than 47. Felt her stomach tighten. Some of the survivors had already died. Every hour they delayed meant more deaths. "Put us down as close as possible." The Defiance landed hard, its legs sinking into soil that immediately began trying to digest them. Ordered the crew to move fast. They had maybe an hour before the ground ate through the landing gear. Outside, the air was thick and yellow. Even through her helmet filters, could smell something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. The forest around them was alive with sounds she did not recognize. Clicking, whistling, something that might have been screaming. "Stay close," she ordered. "Move toward the crash site. Do not touch anything unless you have to." They walked through the alien jungle in single file. Took point, his medical scanner in one hand and a pistol in the other. Followed, recording everything she saw for later study. Brought up the rear, his rifle sweeping back and forth across the shadows. The plants were wrong. That was the only way could describe them. They moved when there was no wind. Their colors shifted as the humans passed. Some of them seemed to lean toward the group as if curious. Others pulled away as if afraid. "The vegetation is reacting to us," whispered, "but not aggressively. It seems confused." "Confused is good," replied. "Confused means not attacking." They reached the crashed council ship 20 minutes later. The bright Discovery had hit the ground at an angle, plowing a long trench through the forest before coming to rest against a cliff wall. The hull was breached in several places. Emergency lights flickered through the gaps. And there were bodies. Counted 7 before she stopped counting. Council species of different shapes and sizes, all dead. Some looked like they had been attacked by animals. Others seemed to have simply stopped living, their bodies unmarked but lifeless. The planet had killed them in different ways, as if testing which methods worked best. "Movement ahead," said quietly. Inside the cargo bay, multiple life signs. They approached carefully. The cargo bay door was sealed from the inside, with scorch marks suggesting someone had welded it shut. Knocked on the metal, the sound echoing through the dead ship. "This is Commander of the Earth Exploration Corps," she called out. "We are here to rescue you. Open the door." Silence. Then slowly, the sound of metal scraping against metal. The door opened a crack and a single eye peered out. It was large and multifaceted, like an insect's eye, and it was filled with terror. "You came," a voice whispered. "You actually came." The door opened wider. Behind it saw the survivors. 23 beings huddled together in the darkness, surrounded by makeshift barricades and the bodies of their dead colleagues. They were from different species. Some had fur. Some had scales. Some had no skin at all, just exposed muscle that pulsed with strange colors, but they all shared the same expression. They had given up hope, and now hope had arrived wearing human faces. The speaker was a tall creature that's translator identified as Click Singer. Their species was one of the oldest in the galaxy, with a history stretching back millions of years. But right now, Clicksinger looked like a frightened child. "The Council said no rescue," Clicksinger said. "They told us to make peace with our endings. They said we were acceptable losses." Stepped into the cargo bay. She looked around at the survivors, at their wounds and their fear and their exhaustion. She thought about the Council's message, about acceptable losses and ancient wisdom. "The Council is not here," she said. "We are." Was already moving among the survivors, checking injuries and distributing medical supplies. Some of the wounds were bad. Infections from the planet's bacteria had spread quickly. Several survivors would need surgery if they were going to live. "We cannot move everyone at once," reported. "Some of them are too weak. We need to stabilize them first." "How long?" asked. "A day, maybe two, if the planet lets us stay that long." As if in answer, something screamed in the jungle outside. It was a sound like metal being torn apart, loud and hungry and very, very close. Moved to the door, his rifle raised. Something is coming, something big. Through the gap in the hull, could see trees falling. Whatever was approaching, it was pushing through the forest like the plants were not even there. The ground shook with each step it took. "Everyone stay calm," she ordered. "Do not fire unless it attacks." The creature emerged from the jungle. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Defiance. Its body was covered in plates of something that looked like bone but moved like muscle. It had too many legs and too many eyes, and its mouth was a vertical slit filled with teeth that seemed to go back forever. The survivors screamed. Some tried to run deeper into the cargo bay. Others simply froze, too terrified to move. The creature stopped. Its many eyes focused on the group, examining them. Then slowly those eyes moved to the humans. And stayed there. It stared at for a long moment. She stared back, her hand on her weapon but not drawing it. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to get away from this thing as fast as possible. But she stood still. She had learned long ago that running from predators often triggered their hunting instincts. Sometimes the best thing to do was nothing at all. The creature made a sound. It was not a growl or a roar, but something almost like a question. Then, without attacking, it turned and walked back into the jungle. The survivors stared at it in disbelief. "Why did it leave?" Clicksinger asked. "It killed 3 of our people when we first crashed. Why did it not attack now?" Watched the creature disappear into the trees. She thought about what it said earlier, about the planet being designed to kill Council species specifically. "I think," she said slowly, "it did not recognize us as food." For the first time in days, Clicksinger made a sound that the translator identified as laughter. It was weak and uncertain, but it was there. "You humans," they said, "you are very strange." Smiled inside her helmet. "You have no idea." By the 3rd day, had killed 14 apex predators. He was starting to take it personally. The creatures came in all shapes and sizes. Some flew on wings made of membrane and bone. Some crawled on dozens of legs. Some had no legs at all and moved by pulling themselves along with muscular tentacles. But they all had one thing in common. They wanted to eat the Council survivors and kept shooting them before they could. "Another one," he announced, lowering his rifle. Behind him, something that looked like a spider crossed with a shark fell to the ground. 2 holes burned through its skull. "That makes 15. Looked up from his patient, a small furry being whose arm had been badly infected. "You are keeping count." "Someone has to." Reloaded his weapon. "I want to know exactly how many of these things I kill before we leave this planet." The situation was better than it had been, but still far from good. Had managed to stabilize the most critical survivors, but several would not survive the journey to the quarantine station without better medical equipment. They needed to move, but moving meant exposing weakened people to the most hostile environment in the galaxy. spent most of her time planning the route. The quarantine station was 300 kilometers to the north, built on high ground where the original monitors had watched the planet from relative safety. If they could reach it and reactivate its beacon, they could signal for extraction. Admiral had positioned a rescue fleet just outside the quarantine zone, waiting for their call. 300 kilometers. On Earth, it would be a long hike but nothing impossible. On 7, it might as well have been a journey to another star. Doctor had set up a small laboratory in the cargo bay, studying samples from the planet's ecosystem. She worked constantly, sleeping only when her body refused to stay awake any longer. On the third night, she called over with an expression of grim triumph on her face. "I understand it now," said. "The planet, the creatures, all of it. I know why the quarantine has lasted so long." She pulled up her findings on a cracked display screen. Images of cellular structures and genetic sequences filled the view, along with comparisons to council biology. "This planet was not always like this," explained. 10,000 years ago, maybe even longer, it was transformed. Every organism here, from the smallest bacteria to the largest predator, was engineered. They were designed. "Designed by who?" asked. "The architects, an ancient species that disappeared before the council was even formed. According to the old records, they were masters of biological engineering. They could create entire ecosystems from scratch, and they created this one as a weapon. Zoomed in on a particular genetic sequence. Look at this. Every predator on this planet has the same targeting mechanism built into their DNA. They identify their prey using specific protein markers, markers that are common to all council species." Felt a chill run down her spine. They were designed to hunt council species specifically. Exactly. The architects built this planet to kill any species that shared certain genetic traits, traits that evolved independently across the galaxy but are similar enough to trigger the predator's hunting instincts. Paused. "Humans do not have these traits. Our evolution was completely isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Our proteins are different. Our cellular structure is different. To this planet's weapons, we are not recognized as targets." "We are biological static," said Understanding. "The weapons cannot see us as prey. They can still hurt us if we get in their way," warned. "But they do not actively hunt us. That is why the large predator left yesterday. It looked at us, and its instincts told it we were not food. We confused it." Laughed, a rare sound from the quiet soldier. "The deadliest planet in the galaxy, and it does not know what to do with us. I like that." Turned to Click Singer and the other survivors who had been listening. "This changes our plan. If the predators are not targeting us specifically, we can use that. The humans will form a protective ring around the group. We will walk right through the hunting grounds." Click Singer's antennae twitched with uncertainty. "You would put yourselves between us and the predators." "That is the idea. But you could still be killed if a predator attacks and you are in the way." Met the alien's compound eyes. "Then we will be in the way. That is what we came here to do." They left the crashed ship the next morning. The survivors who could walk helped carry those who could not, led the group with at her side, both of them scanning the jungle for threats, and positioned themselves in the middle of the formation, ready to provide medical care or scientific analysis as needed. The journey was slow and terrifying. Every sound from the jungle made the survivors flinch. Every shadow seemed to hide something deadly, but the humans kept them moving, kept them calm, kept them alive. On the fifth day, they encountered a pack of predators blocking their path. The creatures were lean and fast, built for chasing down prey. There were at least 30 of them, more than enough to overwhelm the group. Told everyone to stop, then she walked forward alone. The predators watched her approach. Their bodies tensed, ready to attack, but they did not move. Their instincts were telling them that this strange creature was not prey, and they did not know how to respond. Walked right through the middle of the pack. She moved slowly and steadily, never showing fear, never making sudden movements. The predators parted around her like water around a stone. When she reached the other side, she turned and waved for the others to follow. Stay close to the humans, move slowly, do not run. One by one, the survivors walked through the pack. The predators growled and snapped at them, but every time one got too close, a human stepped in the way, stood directly between a snarling creature and a terrified young scientist, staring it down until it backed away. It took an hour, but everyone made it through. "Impossible," whispered a survivor, a being with silver scales and 3 eyes. 10,000 years, and no one ever thought to just walk past them. "No one ever tried," replied. The council decided the planet was unconquerable and stopped looking for solutions. They accepted the quarantine because fighting it was hard. "And humans do not accept such things." Smiled, "Humans accept many things. Impossible is not one of them." The days blurred together. They walked through acid rain that burned holes in their equipment but left human skin merely irritated. They crossed rivers filled with organisms that attacked anything that entered the water, but hesitated when humans waded in first. They climbed mountains where the air itself was toxic, filtering it through masks that the council species could never have used. On the 20th day, they lost their first survivor, an elderly being whose body simply gave out from the strain of the journey. Did everything he could, but some wounds were beyond healing. Held the survivor's hand as they died. She did not know their name or their species or anything about their life, but she stayed with them until the end, because no one should die alone. "I am sorry," Clicksinger said afterward. "I know you came to save us all." "We came to try," replied. "Sometimes trying is not enough, but we keep trying anyway." On the 30th day, they reached the quarantine station. It sat on top of a cliff, overlooking the deadly jungle below. Its walls were intact. Its systems were still running. After 10,000 years, the station was still waiting for someone to come and give it new orders. Went to work on the communication systems while secured the perimeter. Set up a medical bay, and began treating the survivors properly for the first time since the journey began. Stood at the edge of the cliff and looked out at the planet that had killed so many. It was still beautiful in its terrible way. The clouds still swirled with deadly colors. The forest still rustled with hungry movement. But it was not unconquerable. It had never been unconquerable. The galaxy had simply stopped trying. Commander called from inside the station. "I found something. You need to see this." Turned away from the view. Whatever had discovered, it would have to wait until the survivors were safe. That was what mattered now. Everything else could wait. The quarantine station's archives had been waiting for 10,000 years. No one had ever come to read them. No one had ever wanted to know what they contained. Until now. Stood in the center of the station's control room, surrounded by holographic displays that flickered with ancient data. The technology was old, older than most civilizations in the current galaxy, but it still worked. The architects had built things to last. "I started by trying to repair the communication beacon," explained as entered the room. "But the beacon was connected to the main computer, and the main computer had this." She gestured and the displays changed. Images appeared. Records. Historical documents from a time before the quarantine, before the council, before any of the species new had even evolved. "These are the architects' own files," said. "They're records of what this planet was and what they did to it." Looked at the images. She saw a world covered in cities, in technology, in life. 7 had not always been a death world. Once, long ago, it had been home. "What happened?" she asked. His expression darkened. "The architects happened." She pulled up a new set of records. These were harder to look at. They showed people being transported to the planet against their will, species that the architects had conquered, prisoners of war, political enemies, anyone the architects considered unworthy of living among them. 7 was a prison world, said. Not a natural disaster, not a biological accident, a prison. The architects dumped anyone they did not want here and let them die. Felt sick. 10,000 years. The quarantine has been protecting a mass grave for 10,000 years. It gets worse. Changed the display again. When the architects began to decline, they knew other species would eventually find this place. They knew their crimes would be discovered, so they created the biological weapons we have been fighting. They redesigned the entire ecosystem to kill anyone who came here. To hide the evidence. To hide their shame. The quarantine was never about protecting the galaxy from a dangerous planet. It was about making sure no one ever learned what the architects had done. Stood in silence, processing what she had learned. The Great Quarantine, the ancient wisdom that the Council had maintained for, was nothing more than a cover-up. The elder races had been protecting a lie without even knowing it. Or had they known? Has anyone from the Council seen these records before? Asked. Hesitated. According to the access logs, this station was visited once, about 8,000 years ago. A Council science team managed to land and reach this location. They accessed these files. And then they left. They returned to Council space and reported that the planet was too dangerous to explore further. They recommended maintaining the quarantine indefinitely. Met's eyes. They knew, Commander, at least some of them knew, and they chose to say nothing. The door to the control room opened. Clicksinger entered, their antennae twitching as they sensed the tension in the air. Behind them came several other survivors, curious about what the humans had found. You have discovered something, Clicksinger said. It was not a question. Something important. Considered lying. She could tell them that the records were damaged, that there was nothing useful in the archives. The survivors had been through enough without learning that their own galaxy had been maintaining a cover-up for 10. But had never been good at lying, and these people deserved to know the truth. The quarantine was never about protection, she said. It was about hiding a crime. This planet was a prison, and the weapons that have been killing your people were designed to make sure no one ever found out. She told them everything. The architects, the prisoners, the deliberate transformation of a prison world into a death trap, the council team that had discovered the truth and buried it. When she finished, the control room was silent. The survivors looked at each other, processing a revelation that changed everything they thought they knew about their galaxy's history. 8,000 years, Clicksinger said finally. 8,000 years of acceptable losses. 8,000 years of sending people to die, knowing that the quarantine was protecting nothing but an old lie. Some of them might not have known, offered. The original cover-up was a long time ago. The current council might genuinely believe the quarantine is necessary. Does that matter? Asked the silver-scaled survivor. Whether they knew or not, they let people die. They decided that some lives were acceptable losses. They made that choice over and over for thousands of years. Who had been standing guard at the door spoke up. The question is what we do now. We have the truth. Do we share it? Everyone looked at. She was the commander. The decision was hers. She thought about it carefully. Revealing the truth would cause chaos. The council would be embarrassed. Old alliances might break. Species that had trusted the elder races might lose that trust forever. But the alternative was continuing the lie, maintaining the cover-up, accepting that some crimes were too old to punish and some truths were too dangerous to speak. We share it, said, all of it, every record, every file, every piece of evidence. The galaxy deserves to know what was done here. She turned to the main control console and began activating the station's long-range communication array. The beacon powered up, its signal strong enough to reach far beyond the quarantine zone. Commander said, if we broadcast this information, the council will be furious. They might try to stop us. They might retaliate against Earth. Let them try. Finish the activation sequence. We did not come here to make friends with the Council. We came here to save lives. And part of saving lives is making sure no one else dies to protect a 10,000-year-old lie. The beacon sent its signal. Within minutes, they received a response. Admiral's face appeared on the communication screen, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Commander, we have been waiting for your signal. Are the survivors safe?" 23 survivors, Admiral, ready for extraction. Nodded. "We are moving into the quarantine zone now. The Council has already sent protests, but they can file complaints after we get you out of there." "Admiral, I am transmitting some files along with the extraction request. Historical records from the quarantine station. I need you to make sure these reach Earth Command and are shared with every species in the galaxy." Raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like it is going to cause some trouble." "A lot of trouble, but it is the right thing to do." The Admiral smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had spent too many years dealing with galactic politics. "Commander, I have known you for 15 years. You have never once made my job easy. I would be disappointed if you started now." He cut the transmission to coordinate the rescue, turned to find the survivors watching her with expressions she could not quite read. "You have just started a war," Clicksinger said. "Not a war with weapons, but a war of ideas, a war of truth against lies. The Council will not forgive this." "Probably not," agreed. "Why would you do this for us? We are not your species. We are not your allies. We are strangers who crashed on a planet and waited to die." Considered the question. It was a fair one. Humans had nothing to gain from this. They were newcomers to the galactic community, still learning its rules and politics. Making enemies of the Council was dangerous. Making enemies by exposing their ancient shame was even more dangerous. But there was something more important than safety, more important than politics, more important than all the careful calculations of risk and reward. "Because it was the right thing to do," said simply. "Because you were going to die and we could help. Because the truth matters even when it is inconvenient. Because that is who we are." Clicksinger stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, they lowered their head in a gesture that the translator identified as deep respect. "Humans," they said, "I think the galaxy has underestimated you." Outside the station, the first rescue ships were appearing in the sky. The quarantine that had stood for 10,000 years was ending. And nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was the largest enclosed Space Commander had ever seen. It could hold representatives from 10,000 species, and today, it seemed like all of them had come. She stood at the center of the speaking floor, a small human figure surrounded by beings that had ruled the stars for millions of years. Some of them were giants, towering creatures that made her feel like an ant. Others were so small they needed magnification screens to be seen. All of them were watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely contained anger. Ambassador Prism Voice spoke first. Their crystalline body flashed with colors that the translation system identified as formal displeasure. "Commander of Earth, you stand before this assembly to explain your actions. In the past 3 months, you have violated the oldest quarantine in galactic history. You have destroyed defense systems that protected this galaxy for 10. You have broadcast classified information to every species with a communication device. And you have done all of this without Council authorization." Straightened her back. She was still wearing her suit, the same one she had worn on 7. She had been offered formal diplomatic clothing, but she had refused. She wanted the assembly to see where she had been and what she had done. "I did all of those things," she said, "and I would do them again." A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. Several species representatives made sounds of outrage. Others seemed more interested in hearing what she had to say. "You were told that rescue was impossible," Prism Voice continued. "You were warned that you would die. You ignored the wisdom of species that were ancient when your world was still cooling from its formation. Why? Looked around the chamber, so many eyes watching her, so many species waiting to judge. Because 47 people were going to die, she said, and I could help them. 24 died anyway, another representative pointed out. This one was a tall, thin being with silver skin and no visible face. Your rescue saved only 23. By your own standards, you failed. 23 people are alive who would otherwise be dead. I do not call that failure. The silver being made a gesture of contempt. You call it success. You lost nearly half of them. I call it trying, something this assembly has not done for 8,000 years. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Prism voice flashed bright red, demanding order. It took several minutes for the noise to subside. You speak of trying, Prism voice said when quiet finally returned. But you do not understand what you have done. The quarantine existed for reasons you cannot comprehend. It protected the galaxy from dangers you cannot imagine. By ending it, you have exposed us all to risks that we spent 10,000 years avoiding. Had been waiting for this moment. She pulled a small device from her belt and activated it. Holographic images appeared above her head, the same historical records she had found in the quarantine station. These are the reasons the quarantine existed, she said. Not to protect the galaxy, to hide a crime. She walked the assembly through the truth. The prison planet, the prisoners, the cover-up that had lasted 10, the council team that had discovered the evidence and buried it. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Not the angry silence of before, but something deeper, something that felt almost like shame. You knew, said, looking directly at Prism Voice. Maybe not you personally. Maybe the knowledge was lost over the generations. But someone in the council knew. Someone made the decision to maintain the quarantine even after learning what it really was. Someone decided that protecting an ancient shame was more important than saving lives. Prism Voice's colors shifted to something the translator could not identify. What was done cannot be undone. The architects are gone. The prisoners are dead. Revealing this information serves no purpose except to cause chaos. It serves the purpose of truth. It serves the purpose of making sure no one else dies to protect a lie. It serves the purpose of showing the galaxy that some things matter more than convenience. A new voice spoke up. Turned to see Click Singer standing among the representatives, having been granted speaking rights as a survivor. I was on that planet, Click Singer said. I watched my colleagues die. I waited for rescue that the council told us would never come. And then these humans appeared. They walked through a world that had killed every previous expedition. They faced predators that had stopped armies. They did this not because they had to, not because they would gain anything, but because they believed it was right. Click Singer turned to face the assembly. The council spent 10,000 years being afraid of one planet. These humans spent 3 months solving it, not because they are stronger than us, not because they are smarter, because they refused to accept that it could not be done. More murmurs swept through the chamber. Some species representatives were looking at the humans with new expressions, not just anger or contempt, but something that might have been respect. What do you want? Prism Voice asked finally. You have made your point. You have embarrassed ancient civilizations. You have proven our defenses inadequate. What more could you possibly want? Thought about the question. What did she want? She had not come here seeking anything for herself or for humanity. She had come because people needed help, and she had refused to do nothing. But standing here, in this chamber full of beings that had given up on saving lives because it was too hard, she realized there was something she wanted after all. I want you to stop accepting the unacceptable, she said. I want you to stop calling abandonment wisdom and cowardice caution. I want you to look at impossible situations and ask if they are really impossible or if you have simply stopped trying. She gestured to the survivors who had accompanied her to the assembly. 23 beings from 12 species, all of them alive because a handful of humans had refused to listen when they were told it could not be done. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day. Our planet has earthquakes and hurricanes and wildfires. Our sun gives us cancer. Our own cells betray us. We live our entire lives knowing that death is always close, and we keep going anyway. Not because we are not afraid, but because we refuse to let fear decide what is possible. She turned back to Prism Voice. The galaxy spent 10,000 years afraid of one planet. We spent 3 months solving it, not because we are special, because we tried. The ambassador was silent for a long moment. The entire chamber was silent. "What would you have us do?" Prism Voice asked. There was something different in their voice now, something that sounded almost like genuine curiosity. "Help us clean it up," said. "The planet can be made safe. The architect's weapons can be neutralized. In a few generations, 7 could be a real world again, not a monument to ancient cruelty. Work with us. Not because we demand it, but because it is the right thing to do." "And if we refuse?" Shrugged, "Then we will do it ourselves. It will take longer, it will be harder, but we will do it anyway." The assembly debated for 7 hours, stood and listened as representatives argued back and forth. Some wanted to punish Earth for its defiance. Others wanted to pretend the whole thing had never happened. A few, a growing few, suggested that maybe the humans had a point. In the end, they voted. It was not unanimous, but it did not need to be. The majority decided that the quarantine would not be restored. 7 would be reclassified. And for the first time in galactic history, a joint operation would be launched to undo the damage of the architects. Humans would lead the effort. No one argued against that. As left the chamber, Clicksinger caught up with her. "You have changed things," they said. "Not just the quarantine, everything. The galaxy will not be the same after today." Nodded, "I hope so." "Are you not worried? You have made enemies today, powerful enemies who do not forget." Thought about it. She thought about the council, about their ancient power and their long memories. She thought about all the ways they could make life difficult for Earth and for humanity. Then she thought about the 23 people walking behind her. People who were alive because someone had refused to accept that they could not be saved. "I am worried," she admitted, "but being worried has never stopped us before." Clicksinger made that strange sound again, the one the translator called laughter. "Humans," they said, "I think you are exactly what this galaxy needed." Smiled, "Maybe. Or maybe we are just too stubborn to know when to quit." They walked together toward the exit, toward a future that no one could predict. Behind them, the assembly chamber was still buzzing with conversations that would change everything. The quarantine was over. The truth was free. And across the galaxy, species were beginning to whisper a new idea. When the universe says something is impossible, ask the humans. They probably will not listen anyway.